All right, today we're tackling a really tough topic, one of the most challenging questions in all of modern medicine, withholding life support. It's a deeply personal and complex issue, so to help us unpack it, we're going to walk through a hypothetical case study. This will really shine a light on the key ethical principles at play. So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with our patient's dilemma and the big ethical question it raises. Then we'll look at the guiding principles, the ethical framework really, and see how it applies to her case. And to wrap things up, we'll look at a totally different scenario. What happens when time is running out and a decision has to be made fast? Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to start with this hypothetical case that really gets to the heart of the matter. And just a reminder, this isn't a real person, but the situation is designed to help us all think through these incredibly tough questions together. So let's meet our patient. She's a 56-year-old woman, and she's just been brought into the hospital. The immediate issue? She's really struggling to breathe. And as you can imagine, that's often a sign that something much more serious is going on. This didn't just happen overnight. Her story actually began 3 years ago when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. More recently, things took a turn. The cancer spread to her lungs. And now, today, her condition is getting worse, and it's happening quickly. Because of how quickly she's declining, her medical team has to have a very, very difficult conversation with her. They've told her that at this point, even a major surgery is, well, it's unlikely to help. There's almost no hope for recovery. And that right there is a huge turning point. She takes 2 days to think everything over, and then she makes her decision. It's a clear one. If things get any worse, she does not want to have surgery. And that choice is what brings us face to face with this ethical dilemma. Right, so her choice really forces us to confront the central ethical question here, a question that doctors, nurses, and families have to deal with all the time. And here it is. Is it ethically okay to withhold life support? And if it is, what are the rules? What specific circumstances have to be in place for that to be the right call? Now, to answer a question that heavy, you can't just go with your gut. You need a system, a framework. And luckily, medical ethics gives us exactly that, a clear set of principles to guide these incredibly difficult decisions. So, according to the source material, withholding treatment is considered ethically acceptable, but only, and this is a big only if, two conditions are met. First, there has to be no reasonable hope of getting better. And second, the burden of the treatment itself is just too much to handle, whether that's for the patient, their family, or even society as a whole. This leads us to this really important idea called ethically extraordinary treatment. Now, extraordinary here doesn't mean the procedure is rare or super complex. Nope, it just means it checks those two boxes: no hope and too much of a burden. So get this, even a really common medical procedure could be considered ethically extraordinary in the right or, I guess, wrong circumstances. And here's the crucial part. These rules are consistent. This isn't just a framework for deciding whether or not to start a treatment. It's the exact same framework you'd use to decide whether to stop a treatment that's already in progress. The principles don't change. Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this actually work in practice? Let's take these ideas and apply them directly to our patient's case. When we look at her situation, it lines up perfectly with the framework. First, her doctors have already said there's no reasonable hope for her to recover. Second, we're working on the assumption that she made this choice on her own with no pressure from anyone. And third, that she was fully informed. She knew exactly what she was deciding. So because her situation meets all those ethical criteria, the conclusion is pretty straightforward. Her wish not to have the surgery, it has to be respected. It's an ethically sound position. Now, something really important to point out here is that this case had what the source calls the luxury of time. She had days to talk it over with her family and the doctors. But what happens when that luxury just isn't there? And that brings us to a much, much tougher scenario. Let's switch gears completely, away from a calm hospital room and into the chaos of an emergency situation. I mean, look at the difference. It's night and day. In our first case, you have time to talk, you know what the patient wants, and the outlook is clear. In an emergency, the decision has to be made right now. You probably have no idea what the patient's wishes are, and the future is a total question mark. So that leaves us with this massive question, right? When a doctor's in the ER with a patient they've never seen before, with no history and an unknown prognosis, what on earth are they supposed to do? The guidance from the source on this is crystal clear. When in doubt, you always err on the side of life. The default action is to intervene, to do everything you can to save that person. But, and this is a big but, that immediate decision to intervene isn't set in stone. If, after the dust settles, it becomes clear that the treatment isn't helping, that there's no hope for recovery and the burden is too great, then the conversation can change. You can go right back to that same ethical framework we talked about to consider withdrawing life support. And that leaves us right here, with the fundamental tension at the heart of modern medicine. How do you balance the profound duty to save a life with the equally profound duty to honor what a person wants for themselves? There are no easy answers, but this ethical framework is our best guide for navigating these deeply human and incredibly difficult decisions.